Welcome into the DNVR Rockies Podcast presented by Strava Craft Coffee. You know you got to use that promo code DNVR20 because you'll save 20% off your entire purchase of that CBD-infused, deliciously rich, and potentially life-altering Strava Craft Coffee. I am your host, Drew Creasman. Joining me, as always, is beat writer Patrick Lyons. And on this episode, we're going to discuss a little bit of the Colorado Rockies 13-2 loss to the San Diego Padres. Honestly, not much to break down there from an analytical standpoint. When your starting pitcher comes out and just does not have it, you typically lose the ball game. But the Colorado Rockies did make a trade today that's remarkably intriguing from a number of facets, and they've got a lot of things that are positives and negatives for them moving forward. So we're going to dive more into that than trying to explain why three pitchers who've, two of which have struggled all year and one of which was probably due for one, breaking that down too much isn't going to be to too many people's benefit. But Patrick, let's go ahead and start there. Ryan Castellani called up after, Peter Lambert had to go down with the Tommy John. That would probably have been his spot this year. Castellani instead called upon for that. We had talked about how he'd had some shine as a prospect. A lot of it had come off. You didn't know what to expect. His first 5 starts, very, very good, about as good as you could have hoped for out of Castellani. Finally lays an egg, comes out, just doesn't have it, gives up 5 runs in the first 2 innings.
Yeah, even the Houston start where he goes 5 innings and gives up 5 runs, you say that's okay to that lineup. And he kept them competitive in that game. So that certainly by no means was any kind of issue there. And as you said, yeah, this was his first real misstep so far in his early career after being a guy that was, very much highly touted coming out of the state of Arizona as a prep pitcher, and had to repeat at Double-A. And hey, they needed him this year, and he stepped up in a really major way. But today only goes the 2 innings, gets his pitch count up to 50, struggles there in the first inning, gives up a monster home run to Hosmer, gives up 2 more runs in the second inning, and is immediately followed by a guy who just was activated yesterday in Chichi Gonzalez. I was asked about him last night and say, hey, could he be a factor? And he say, well, yeah, if Castellani, lays an egg or 2, Chichi's the next guy you go to. And then immediately there you see Chichi go out and throw 4 innings, only gives up that 1 run, and you have to say, hey, is this your number 5 starter now immediately? They're off on Thursday, so you have an opportunity to skip him until you get to next week at some point. So you might not really answer that question here in a week's time, but the question does beg to be asked if Chichi is now your number 5 starter going forward.
Yeah, and I think Castellani, obviously, he's earned another look, and some of it has been. I do think he's gotten a little bit lucky in his first several starts, but still you take it. You have to tip your cap to the production that you've gotten out of a guy that you weren't expecting anything out of so far this year. But yeah, I think that's an open-ended question. I thought Chichi looked very good in his 4 innings out there, really just making the one mistake as you talked about. And so, for your 5th rotation day, when you're going up against the other team's expected to be ace, though he hasn't been that this year. Chris Paddock pitched a very good game today for the Padres, was more the guy they had expected him to be. That's an on-paper loss, and you had talked about coming into this series. I thought maybe the Rockies could figure their way into 3 wins because I thought they'd steal that first one behind Freeland, and they very nearly did before the bullpen imploded. But this looks like a split, where the Rockies maintain, the season series advantage just slightly over the Padres. If they can come out and get the win on Monday, it's a weird series to have it end on a Monday. That's a whole new thing. Of all the things this year in baseball, but frustrating that the Rockies fall back to 500, and frustrating that you lose 13-2, but you don't get rollover runs, and so these sort of beatdowns don't mean as much if the Rockies can get back and find their way into a a controlled baseball game that they can win behind German Marquez.
Yeah, and they're going to need that. Tomorrow night's game, it's interesting. It's on ESPN. We didn't think that it was going. We're going to see the Rockies on ESPN for another decade or so after last year's, opening weekend, bombardment by the Dodgers, and it was okay. Up there in Boston / New York, ESPN is situated right there in the middle in Connecticut. They're going to say, all right, those Rockies, we gave them a shot. All right, they waited 12 years to finally, get back on the big network, so to speak. And man, they crapped the bed, so forget it. But here they are again, kind of in that spotlight, and I think it's an exciting game. I think a lot of it does have to do with how sexy San Diego is right now. But it is a great opportunity for German to really, cement himself, get himself back on track after, that really bad start he had out 2 times ago that totally derailed his ERA. Going into that start, he was a guy that, if you saw a lot of top 10 lists about best pitchers in the game, as they were, hyping up who's a Cy Young candidate after 4 starts, German Marquez was starting to get that love. People were starting to realize, and he has an opportunity to do that tomorrow night once again.
In all those categories, I mean, he was striking guys out, the ERA, not walking people. That's been actually, I think, quietly his calling card for a couple of years now is the very, very low walk rate of German Marquez. And so, I think you're right. I think he's going to be chomping at the bit to come out, get the Colorado Rockies a win, earn them that split in this series against the Padres. But it's going to be tough to do. The team, they're obviously hot. You cannot make a mistake right now to Tatis Jr. or Manny Machado, and I'm going to have to learn who Jake Cronenworth is, apparently. What a jerk. I'm going to have to learn his name. Fine. Actually, it's an easy name to learn. Cronenworth. It sticks out a bit. So we got to do our top names. I forgot to mention, by the way, when they were playing the Dodgers, how much I love the name Brusdar Graterol. It's one of the greatest names in baseball right now. We got to do our top 10 at some point. We'll go around and we'll find them all. So there was another guy who came in the other day. I was like, what a fantastic... It's always relief pitchers anymore. Brusdar Graterol fitting right into that category. But Mychal Givens is a guy with a pretty good, and especially because we're spelling it with a Y. So I'm going to toast, I'll taste it as well. My Breckenridge brew. I've actually got this very fancy nitro pumpkin spice latte ale going on right now. But my favorite when that's because I'm down at the DNVR bar. We got a triple header today, Rockies afternoon. Avs got some work ahead of them. They're down early here. The Nuggets going a little bit later on, so we're doing a lot down here at the DNVR bar. And if you got a heavy sports day, if you're watching all 3 games, you got to have your Breck brew with you, whether you're getting it down here at the DNVR bar or if you're swinging by the farmhouse. Our friends over at Breckenridge Brew will take care of you with some food and some beer. If you call 303-803-1380 from noon to 8 p.m., use that code DNVR, and you will save $5 off both the beer and the food. Great deal from them. And if you're swinging by the DNVR bar, make sure you come up and say hello to me from a safe distance. We've all been doing a very good job of that down here. So, Patrick, I do want to get into talking about that because, as I said, when you lose 13-2, there's not a whole lot to analyze there. Castellani was bad. It happens. Chichi, there were some positive signs. I did see one here, I guess, before we get into the move, a question about coming in from Joseph, Pazos and Deal. What do you do with these guys? And the Rockies really are stuck with those being the only 2 lefties on the roster. And I know the numbers that Jake McGee is putting up with LA make that much more frustrating, though I still don't believe in that. And I also still don't believe that if Jake McGee was still on the Rockies that he'd be putting up those numbers. And furthermore, I don't believe it has anything to do with the difference in coaching or development of those 2 teams. I think it has 100% to do with Jake McGee. But all of that being said, the Rockies are stuck here. You can't just get rid of the 2 lefties in your bullpen, despite the fact that they're clearly the 2 guys who've struggled the most. But bringing in a guy like Mychal Givens, while he's not a lefty reliever, he strengthens your bullpen and limits the amount that you're going to need to rely on these totally unproven commodities.
For sure. We'll get into the guys that the Rockies had to give up for Givens, but the Rockies have have an option.
Who they Givens up?
Who they done Givens it up?
Sorry. I
love it.
apologize.
It's wordplay, right? It's wordplay Sunday.
It was right there. I had to swing at that pitch. It was right down the middle.
When you've got the vim, vigor, and Vavra, as you do, you're going to have some wordplay there. Make sure that doesn't get up your nose there, Drew.
That was so good. That was too good. That was my wordplay was like kindergarten compared to what you just pulled off.
Well, if the Rockies, want to improve their bullpen, they already did it. Right-hander and Mychal Givens. We'll talk about him in a second. They can go out and make another trade for a left-hander. They're probably going to have to pay just as much, possibly more, since there are less of those guys available on the market right now. Right. Or instead of giving up maybe 2 more prospects, they can call up Ryan Rollison. He's a left-handed pitcher. Yes, he has not pitched above high A, right? This year would have been his time at Hartford. I thought there was a chance going into last season that if the Rockies were really making a postseason push, that you could have seen Rollison coming out of the bullpen based off of everything that he did in Asheville in 2018. So, he doesn't have that much experience, but again, a starting pitcher going down to just his 2 best pitches, I think you have an opportunity there, to give him a shot. Yes, it does start his clock a little bit earlier than you would have liked, which means he then becomes a free agent, maybe slightly sooner than you would like, 6 years down the road, but you can't worry about that right now. You didn't worry about it when you dealt away Tyler Nevin, Terrin Vavra for Givens here. Well, you're not losing Ryan Rollison by bringing him up. You might be losing a year of productivity out of him when he's in his prime at 27, 28 years old, but you have an opportunity here right now to capitalize on your weakest spot right now in the bullpen.
And the only way that becomes a problem, Patrick, is if Ryan Rollison turns out to be really good. That's the only way losing a year of control at the end of his contract ends up being an issue. Kind of the way it sort of has with Trevor Story, right? Where they could have held him back for a month in 2016, a year they did not end up competing, and they would have one more year of control over Trevor Story, which right now you can critique and say, man, they maybe should have done that. But the only reason that's turned into a problem is because Trevor Story's a superstar. If Ryan Rollison turns into the kind of player that we're going, man, you really wish they had another year of control on this guy, that means great things for the Rockies. So I'm with you. Bring him up now. I'd love to see it because they got to try something. Pazos and Deal don't have it. They haven't had it all year. It's different than Castellani didn't have it today. That's 1 out of 6. You can handle not having it 1 out of 6 times out. Whether you're a starter, reliever, you live with that. When you haven't had it any of the times out, and I thought that both of those guys, look, go back and I've given myself a pat on the back for predicting that John Gray was going to have an uptick in velo or strike out X number of guys, and whatever I've said about Marquez and Senzatella, I think is my best prediction so far of the season. I have got to punch myself right in the face with the cold take of James Pazos, who I thought was going to be kind of a key component for the Rockies this year, almost a secret weapon. I thought he was going to be fantastic, and he's been awful. I mean, awful. He's been an absolute disaster. And, that's just one more difficulty for the bullpen. I totally understand why Buddy put both of those guys back out there today when they were already down by a lot of runs, saying almost like, show me something. Because if you can't show me something, we're going to go somewhere else, whether it's outside the organization, giving those to the new guy in Givens, or with Ryan Rollison. So it's going to be interesting moving forward. But we'll see less of those guys, I think, and they've earned that.
Yeah, no, Pazos, he showed some potential when he was in Seattle, and obviously that's what Colorado saw when they went and were able to acquire him relatively cheap there off the scrap heap, and that's what the Dodgers did with Jake McGee. You go, all right, well, let's give this guy a shot. He's shown some life. Certainly a veteran like McGee had a lot more of a track record of being successful than a younger guy like James Pazos. But that being said, the magic that the Rockies sometimes can sprinkle on these guys, it just is not translating right now for James Pazos. Philip Deal, he's still a relatively young guy, but maybe he was already at his peak. They gave up Mike Tauchman who was a guy that didn't fit for their roster at the time. So right. You say that's all right, but sometimes these lefty guys, sometimes it's the old lefties that you want and not so much the young ones that never come to fruition. Do you remember a guy by the name of Jerry Vasto? Now, this was a guy that was,
I
a
do.
relatively big deal. I knew you would, Drew, of
Yeah,
course. But they gave up Drew Butera for him, and you go, okay, that's a good deal. They needed a backup catcher at that point in 2018, and Vasto had pitched rather well in Albuquerque and
yeah, he'd
did
been.
a couple things. But you go, you know what, we can afford to lose him for what we need right now, and he really hasn't surfaced since that trade to Kansas City. So you make those deals, but you got to cut your losses at some point, and that might be where they're at with these two guys. I think, again, until you have a replacement, there's no reason to just give them up for nothing. But Rollison is that guy, because anybody else that you're kicking the wheels on from another organization, besides the general salary that the Momfords or any ownership group at this point might be a little, hesitant to pay for, you're also going to have to give up that package of prospects. So Rollison is that option if you need to improve the stock of your lefties in the bullpen.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we got a question in here from Henry. Fantastic listener and question asker pretty much every live show. Make sure you be like Henry and join us on these YouTube live chats. After every one, you got to subscribe so you get that notification about when we're going live. Asking here about being buyers or sellers. And I think love, hate, or medium on the trade that they made today, the Rockies made it loud and clear that they believe themselves to be buyers, that they're going to try to add to this team. There's no other way to sell a move where you push out a couple of prospects and you bring in a guy with a record in Mychal Givens. Now, he is under contract through next year, which to me swings this deal pretty heavily in favor of the Colorado Rockies. If this was a rental for one season and you're moving out Nevin, who I think is an interesting prospect, but a hit or miss. I could see that guy really never having a major league career. I could see him carving out a decent one. Terrin Vavra, the better prospect here, more shine because he's got that positional value as a shortstop. However, to me, I thought Vavra was always a little bit. I know you liked him, Patrick, so I want to let you sell him in a minute. To me, he was always a little bit overrated in the Rocky system. There's other guys I like better, and also he plays shortstop, which is also played by Trevor Story, Garrett Hampson, and Brendan Rodgers. And so to move out that guy and to bring in a reliever who's got a 3.32 ERA throughout his career, sitting like at 1.38 this year. The peripherals have been good for 4 or 5 years running, high strikeouts, decent walk rate, a little higher than I'd like, but still the good stuff. And when I've got Orioles fans tweeting at me, hey, you guys got a good one, that was the one thing. When the Rockies got Brian Shaw, I remember thinking the numbers are great. This guy fits in perfectly. And then a couple of Cleveland fans sent some tweets at me, were like, he'll probably be okay, but this guy's going to raise your heart rate. He can be a nightmare. You don't want him closing games. You don't want him doing X, Y, Z. I was like, it's fine. He's not going to be closing games. It still turned into a problem, right? I had 3, 4, 5 Orioles fans hit me up today and go, Givens, y'all got a good one. That's almost always a great sign for your club.
Sometimes you have to mortgage your future for the present. It's a little bit what the Rockies did with Trevor Story in 2016. I think they thought they were a little bit more ready than they actually were, but he stays healthy, then maybe that's their first postseason since 2008, right? 2009. As it were, the next season, 2017, right? So that's the catalyst. So you lose that extra year of Trevor Story, as we were talking about earlier. But, does he become that player? You don't know. So you start his clock a little bit early. Same thing with Ryan Rollison. If you say, oh, man, we could have had an extra year of him when he was in his prime, you would love to have that with Trevor Story. But you say, yes, but at the time, you were contending. And in 6 years from now, Ryan Rollison could be one of the best pitchers in the entire game. And if the Rockies are, barely scrapping for 500, you go, did they really need that season? Like, it's not as important. So you make trades like that, and so you're getting 2 years, and really you're getting a year and a month of Mychal Givens for ultimately 12 to 14 years of control over these young prospects. Now, there's also a player to be named later. Could be cash considerations as well. So, we'll see what happens. I tend to think it'll be cash considerations rather than the 51st best prospect that the Rockies have to offer. So, that is a shame. But those are the trades you make. Is that you say, okay, well, this guy could be a really good contributing player down the line, but we also don't feel a spot for him on our roster. Where does Tyler Nevin play? As you said, came up as a third baseman, can play a little bit of first base. We saw him in summer camp in the outfield. Doesn't necessarily have a position on this team. And as you said with Vavra, even if Trevor Story leaves the Rockies after the 2021 season, maybe this is an indicator. Maybe this is actually an indicator that the best shortstop prospect in the Rockies is not needed because Trevor Story may be signing a long-term extension with your Colorado Rockies. Might just be a small indicator. But you make that deal because right now is an opportunity you have to capitalize. And, all things being the same, even if Scott Ober comes back healthy, you're going to need Mychal Givens in the bullpen in 2021. Possibly your last opportunity with the window being open before Story and Gray become free agents. So you really like this deal. And yeah, Vavra and Nevin, they both could turn out to be really quality players. And you go, what if? And hey, how much WAR did they put up? Just because you don't win a trade and you look at things like WAR doesn't mean you made a bad trade. It was what you had to do at the time. The Cubs gave up serious prospects to get Aroldis Chapman. Gleyber Torres is one of the best young players in the game right now, and he's going to be a New York Yankee for another 5 years. He might retire with the Yankees. He might go to the Baseball Hall of Fame. But the Chicago Cubs broke a 108-year
won the World Series
to win the World Series.
I do it every time.
Prospects are cool. That's right. Prospects are cool. Parades are cool.
Hell yeah.
So I like this deal. I like Vavra a lot, but you do this trade every single time.
Yeah, and I've been one of those guys that's defended the Rockies making very few moves because I do think that they need to value their internal growth more than any other organization in baseball. On the other hand, and Justin asking a question here, he says, I know everyone's hyper-focused on the bullpen, but should the Rockies be looking for starting offense? And I understand that poll because their issue this year has been offense more often than you'd like. And I think it's going to continue to be moving forward. All of that said, the most generic, 27-year wide Rockies broad take I could have on the trade they made today is this. When you move out position players and acquire pitching, you've done a good job as the Colorado Rockies. They get position players. Terrin Vavra was rated by MLB Pipeline 7th best prospect in the Colorado Rockies system. You know who's never been rated in their top 30? Josh Fuentes. Sam Hilliard has had a hard time cracking their top 20. So, Charlie Blackmon was never seen as a top prospect. Raimel Tapia was supposed to peter out at Double-A. Okay? So the position players tend to work out for the Rockies. They need a mountain of pitchers. And so while you can break down the numbers, and even if it works out for Vavra and Nevin, I'm always going to say, yeah, especially when you look at the resume of a guy like Mychal Givens. It turns out he can't come in and handle the Coors Field thing. That happens to guys. We know it's happened to guys. But here's the other thing I like about this, Patrick. He's ARB 3 for next year and an unrestricted free agent after that, which means how much money he gets paid in 2021 is directly related to his performance this season and how much money he will make in unrestricted free agency as a guy who's had a very good career to this point and could be set to make some decent money as a reliever will be dependent on how he pitches for the Colorado Rockies from here on out. Basically, if this guy's going to earn a big contract in his career, he has to be good for the Rockies for the rest of this season and through next season to make it work. And that's a guy you want on your team with all the incentive in the world to get good.
And you and I had talked once this trade went off. We went back and forth on our thoughts, and my takeaway was that because of that reason, because he'll be around for next year, And yes, part of what he makes is due on his productivity this year, as well as in the past too. But you're right. What he does this year, the Rockies immediately install him as their closer. He's got 20 career saves already. Now, when he goes to arbitration or when he exchanges numbers with the Rockies, guys that are saving games get paid more money. This was a big to-do with Dellin Betances in the Yankees, and he's no longer there now. That's one of those reasons he couldn't wait to get out of the pinstripes, because they kind of screwed him over a little bit. Like we've been saying all season.
A little bit. That was nice of you.
You don't necessarily want your best pitcher in the ninth. You want him in other spots. So
totally.
For Givens, you go, all right, you know what? We do need those outs still in the 7th and 8th. So that's that's still crucial right now. But you like a guy like Bard, who's got the mental makeup, so you keep him in the 9th for right now. And Givens goes ahead, and he's your guy in the 8th. And as you said, Drew, about offense and pitching, one thing that the Rockies could do is get creative and shop a guy like maybe Daniel Murphy, as we've seen Josh Fuentes get 4 starts and look fantastic.
Got a walk-off hit the other night. Come on, who needs a guy who can get some walk-off hits?
There you go. And has playoff experience. So you can shop Daniel Murphy. You could shop Elias Diaz, who has not, unfortunately, emerged as that guy that potentially could have stolen Tony Walter's job. But you got 2 bats right there that somebody else would say, hey, we'd love to have that guy. We'll give you maybe a slightly lesser left-handed reliever out of our pen. Murphy's making a lot more money.
Tony Watson or such as somebody that can throw the ball over the plate. Give me a lefty.
Yeah, there are those options out there. Not Josh Hader, so he's a little too pricey. He's in the Dodgers price range. You know what I mean?
Wasn't Givens, though, a little bit better than you thought? Because you and I had talked about this before, and I think we had set our sights a little bit lower than a Mychal Givens type. Yeah. So I think this may be at the highest end of what we expected them to add. And I think you're right. He's now their fireman, especially with Estevez being a little bit shaky. I'm totally with you. So if they can bring in a lefty he doesn't even have to be that guy. They don't have to do that again. They don't have to move out 2 of their top prospects. Move your 25th best prospect. Move a Riley Pint for a lefty reliever who can get the ball over the plate. Because right now Pazos and Deal can't throw decent strikes over the plate. I'm so with you. And throw in Daniel Murphy to make it work. Open up space for Hampson and Rogers and Fuentes, who they had out there starting at first base again today, because they've recognized what you have recognized, sir. He plays phenomenal defense, and he actually is putting the bat on the ball right now. There's got to be some avenue here. I think it's going to be an exciting final couple of hours. I would have guessed they were done, but I don't know, man. I think they could roll a few more, at least one more thing out here.
I think so too. And to what you talked about with offense for pitching. And making those moves, there's opportunity there with those guys in the lower levels of the minors that haven't developed the way they would have liked. You said Riley Pint. That is huge, because if you look at the players, we still don't know quite yet who they gave up for the catcher, Jason Castro from the Angels. But the 2 players that they gave up for Mitch Moreland were guys that they needed to be on the 40-man roster by this December. Because again, when you draft a player that's 18 or older, you get 5 years of development. If they're 18 or younger, you get 6 years where you sign them. Otherwise, they get left exposed to the Rule 5 draft. And the Rockies have a couple interesting names. I think Colton Welker is a lock to make the 40-man roster. Yep. This winter, you have Brett Boswell. Helcris Olivares is kind of a tweener because he hasn't quite developed where they would have liked.
He's got some value, though. Yeah.
Sure, and they protected Brayling Eusebio a couple years ago before he needed Tommy John surgery. So you have some guy, and Riley Pint is just a guy that hasn't done it, and I don't think there's any chance they protect him. So if another team is really coveting him and trying to be coy and go, hey, what about that Pint kid? Fine. Go ahead, take him. Good luck. And if he becomes something, even if he becomes, a reliable reliever out of the bullpen for 5 years and then becomes a closer before he reaches free agency, sure, you're going to go, oh, man, what would have ever happened? But you know what? What would have happened if he sticks around in this organization is I just don't think he's going to have success at Coors Field, or he just flames out and that's that. So you know
Right.
what? Get something for him. Get something for nothing. If these guys are going to be exposed to the Rule 5 and you could potentially lose them in December anyway, you might as well swing a deal for them right here and right now and improve your odds of going deep into the 2020 postseason.
Absolutely. And Joseph, I see, like, that's why I don't think the Rockies are going to make offensive trades. And quite frankly, it's why I don't think that they should. Remember, however frustrated you are with player X right now is probably how frustrated you were with Ryan Tapia the first 2 weeks of the season. And I don't think they're all going to get that hot, though. Ryan Tapia on base 3 times again today. Like, look, he can hit. The kid can hit. Nolan Arenado's not going to hit 260 for the whole season. Charlie's in a funk right now. Trevor had a bad game today. Those are the guys you need to show up. There's really only one spot in the lineup where you can look and go, they could make a substantial increase offensively there, and it's catcher, and that's so difficult to do because there's only a handful of catchers in all of baseball who can hit. I have no idea what the status of Salvador Perez is right now. He's always been my guy. Like, if he's healthy and good, go right on ahead. I will sing to the hills that they acquired Salvador Perez. Beyond that, there's no catchers that can hit that are available to the Colorado Rockies. You're not moving out guys like McMahon, Hampson, Hilliard, Rogers. These are the guys you need to hit, but the driving force of the offense has to be Nolan Arenado, Charlie Blackmon, and Trevor Story. And when they don't hit, you can't count on the other guys to do it. Ryan Tapia has been a more consistent contributor to the offense over the last 2 weeks than those 3 guys, and that's why the offense feels in a rut. But you don't make a trade to fix that. You trust those 3 guys to come through, and you have to back them up with the best pitching and defense so that when they do hit, the other team's run differential, is low enough so that you're going to win that ball game. Today's ball game, you don't win in any season ever. That's just your pitcher comes out, he doesn't have it, you don't win it. You don't win it with more offense. You don't try to outscore these types of games. You try to make sure they happen as infrequently as possible. And the Rockies starting pitching has been fantastic. Today notwithstanding, it's been fantastic. So lock down the bullpen and trust your offense to get just enough. That's where I'm at.
And who do you credit that starting rotation to? Yes, the starters, but the guys behind the dish have been doing
Straight
that,
up.
calling great games. And unfortunately, Drew, Salvador Perez is doing rather well. Yeah. Going into today, batting .307, 4 homers, 12 ribbies.
Kill me. I love him.
A half a WAR offensively. So yeah, the price is going to be a high. And again,
I'll pay it. Sorry,
he's one of those guys where even if he's not providing that offense, what he does behind the plate is so incredibly valuable.
Oh, he can catch.
As a 5-time Gold Glove award winner, and a multi-time All-Star. So he's doing that. But again, you've got a guy like Tony Walters where he's great. He's doing it defensively. Yes, not offensively.
Can't hit. No, he can't hit. No.
And that play last night just jumps from behind the plate and grabs that ball, kind of frames it out there like, oh, see where I caught it? He did that on Tuesday night too, where he tried to get away with one. It didn't work, but just such great athleticism from him. So you take that defensively. My question to you, Drew, is, and I brought this up last night, is, catcher right now has become that position, I think, for a lot of teams where you punt offensively on, almost like what shortstop used to be like in the 70s and the early 80s. And you had a guy like Ozzie Smith who you look and you go, I don't care about his offense. Look at what he did defensively. Nowadays, Omar Vizquel, he's still knocking on the door of Cooperstown, and they haven't let him in. And there really is a negligible difference between those 2 guys.
There's another thing we can fight with Manny about.
It's the era, right? It was the era where the shortstops did hit in Vizquel's era. They didn't in Ozzie's era. So my question to you is this. You're already punting on the catcher spot offensively. What are your thoughts on punting on first base offensively with Josh Fuentes over there with his glove?
That's where it gets tough, right? Like that's why they keep rolling Daniel Murphy out there. And I get why that's frustrating for people, but just the resume says Daniel Murphy's going to get you X number of extra base hits. He's going to hit doubles. He's going to hit the ball in the air. He's not going to strike out very often. All of those things have, even through his struggles, remained largely true. But for this team, and it feels so counterintuitive. I can't remember who I was having this argument with years ago. He's saying, I almost wish the Rockies would go back to like pre-Humidor days. They couldn't pitch, but they hit a ton of home runs and just try to outscore the offense and do that. And I go, I feel completely the opposite. It's the most chaotic sport in professional sports. You saw what happened today. Games get out of control. And more often than not, they get out of control at Coors Field. Everything you can do to help your run prevention game, I think, is important. I think the acquisition of Daniel Murphy was an overreaction to a very legitimate problem from 17 and 18 where they did not score enough, where they could not hit enough. People got frustrated. They were right in that series against the Brewers in the NLDS. The offense was embarrassing. So they went out and got one of the best postseason bats of the last 10 years. And now they can't get back to the postseason because any inning that gets extended because your first baseman or your shortstop or your catcher or your left fielder can't track down that baseball, it hurts 2 or 3 times as much at Coors Field. And in a 60-game season, it hurts 5 or 6 or 7 times as much at Coors Field. Put Fuentes in there every day. Trade Daniel Murphy, get all the pitching and defense, and wait for Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, and Charlie Blackmon to drive in a run or two. That's all I got.
For sure. And I think that overreaction, is incredibly costly because, look at what, I know David Dahl's been hurt, but look at what David Dahl has done as far as stepping up. And you go, okay, well, there was some added offense. Ryan Tapia, who was good last year, only good, but man, this year he's been a lot better. I love every time this kid draws a walk. It's like it should be the reverse Pedro Serrano, where
I know.
where he had to do or no, that was Willie Mays Hayes. Every time
Willie Mays Hayes do push-ups, yeah.
He had to do those push-ups. If every time he draws a walk, I mean, I don't know. He
should get a little ice cream cone on his way down to first, yeah.
Bingo, exactly. There you go. Or he's the first one in line at the buffet. Like, you know what?
Yeah.
There you go. You go ahead and you get your first order up. So I love that. But they got that offense from those guys, and Hampson stepped up, because for a time, in that 2017 season, think about it, Christian Adames was one of those big bats off the bench. Pat Valleca, who was fantastic off the bench, but wasn't able
taking
to really sustain that. But these guys like Hampson and Hilliard, Dahl, who's now an all-star, Ryan Tapia now, who's a capable,
he'll be back.
Everyday
Dahl is your
outfielder.
Offensive trade, folks. That you reminded me he was on the team, Patrick. it's
right.
Like, right, and that's frustrating. But you're absolutely right. The names those are the guys that have got to be the supplemental offense for your team. They're not going to go out and get a guy who's inherently going to hit better than those guys that there's a place for. Take a look at what the Padres did with Mitch Moreland. I love Mitch Moreland. I could be captain of the Mitch Moreland fan club. Phenomenal beard. Love his swing. I've loved him his whole career. San Diego Padres already have Eric Hosmer, and there may not be a DH in the National League next year. And while I think Moreland's going to help them, and it's a solid acquisition, that can only help you so much. And that's the kind of thing that I think that's one of those moves to make moves that I'm glad the Rockies don't do. They traded 3 of their top 20 prospects or top 25 prospects for 2 guys who are 34 years old on expiring deals or close to, and are nearing the end of their productiveness. Trevor Rosenthal at a 13.50 ERA last year. Moreland's numbers have been going down, as you'd expect for a guy now getting into his mid-30s. And so I think that's just one of those things where people go, hey, they made moves or whatever. You get really exciting, and I think people would like the Rockies to do a thing like that. Get a guy I've heard of, like a Mitch Moreland, who I know can rake. But it's like there's no guarantee that Mitch Moreland's going to give the Padres more for the rest of the year than David Dahl will give the Rockies once he gets back. In fact, if anything, I would probably take the over on Dahl. So recognize where your needs are, as frustrating as the other thing has been. And I think the Rockies actually have been semi-decent at that over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and Jason Castro, the other guy that they acquired as they needed
That's a good pickup.
Catching help, 33 years old.
I can't.
So again, you
but
these...
wrong side of, but I do like Castro. But I'm with you. They're selling off for now. You make a great point there.
Yeah, and they've, we can, this is a podcast for a whole other day, but about how good their system has been, and whether you may or may not like where an organization is ranked by the prospect pundits, here's your evidence right there. The fact that other teams are saying, yeah, we would love this guy, we would love that guy, and we're going to give you some major league talent for it. And the Padres, frankly, don't blink an eye because they feel like they've got, that much, flexibility to do that. And in Castro, they give up a young righty in Gerardo Reyes, who's, no longer a top prospect, but, they, again, use their strength to build more strength on the major league level, because now is the time. For San Diego, they haven't been in the playoffs since game 163
in 07.
Yeah, 2000, which isn't really the playoffs,
right. Does that count?
the regular
Right.
season,
Right.
So I guess maybe it was 2006.
6 or 5, I think.
Because he was
Yeah. Do we know anyone who knows the answer to that? Oh, I think.
Yeah, right. Mr. Black would know. So they're going all in, and you. Again, you love to see that because you just don't always get those opportunities to do it. Isn't that? I mean, that's what you're supposed to do as a team, is to win a championship, not be quality organization every year. It's to win a championship, and the Padres are going out and doing it. You gotta like, if you're a Padres fan, man, you got to be incredibly happy with your team right now.
Oh, 100%. It's funny. I was kind of giving media folks a hard time on Twitter today for how they responded to the Padres making a trade, and how I felt like they would have responded if the Rockies made literally the exact same trade and traded for guys who were over the hill and who have not been great. Certainly last year. Now, Moreland's having a good season, but last year, neither Trevor Rosenthal or Mitch Moreland were that great, and Trevor Rosenthal was a disaster. And if the Rockies had traded for a reliever who had a 13.50 ERA last year, I think they would have been clowned for it. And then they trade for this guy who's got a 1.38 ERA this year and a career 3.32, and people are very quiet about it. We're at the same time giving the Padres a lot of credit. And what I want to say to people also, and I'll probably have to repeat this when we have Manny on for our big clash, but is I actually totally agree that the Padres are doing things how they should be. That's how the Padres should run their team. These are not trades that I would say are bad trades for the Padres, but I don't think they'd be good trades for the Rockies to make. I don't think every team can operate the same way. And I don't think saying, look, see how they're trying and doing X, Y, and Z is something that you can then apply to the Rockies and say, well, they should move out some of their prospects for these guys who are probably over the hill and go for it right now. I just don't think that it works that way. Teams have to take their own approaches, and I think you can respect both teams' different approach to their own unique situations. And for whatever reason, it seems to me like so many people have an extraordinary amount of respect for the way the Padres go about it, despite a lack of results over the last several years. And people have no respect for how the Colorado Rockies go about things, despite some decent results, and that they may be on the verge here now, Patrick, of 3 out of 4 years. Look, I know it's a weird season, but 3 out of 4 years of being over 500 and in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, you make a fair point, is that not every team can operate in the same fashion, obviously. And again, yeah, it's kind of hypocritical because the Rockies have had that success. I think the difference between the two organizations is the Padres are, using a methodology that has worked for, essentially the last 4 World Series winners, and throw the Dodgers in that mix where, either you tank, you're bad for a while. Then now the Dodgers didn't necessarily do that. They invest
They skipped
so much.
that first step.
Yeah, they've got the analytics department that is just fantastic and is able to find any and everybody. And then you
sell your team to Magic Johnson. I don't know why everyone hasn't done that at this point.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, maybe Alex Rodriguez is interested in coming to Colorado. He's a free agent owner, so to speak. But
hey, Rod,
right,
give me a call. I'd love to meet your wife. Big fan.
I mean, you weren't hanging out with him last year when ESPN came, and he was wearing probably a $2,000 tracksuit.
Didn't he look good? I walked by him in the hallway. You walked by him in the hallway, didn't you?
He walked by me, and I just humming, and I'm like, I was like, get up enough nerve.
Is that a real person?
I was like, let me get up enough nerve to talk to his number 2 guy. Like that was how he is. That I'm like, all right, his assistant. I'm gonna get the guts to talk to his assistant. No, it didn't really happen. That was like the one opportunity. We breathed the same air, but it was It was a good air. It was good air that day.
It was good air. It was good air. Yeah.
It was great air. So
I was a little starstruck. I'm just saying, if the missus had walked by, I'd have fallen down. I just went, love don't cost a thing. I love her and have since I was 12. So whatever.
I was going to say, you're singing a song from 20 years ago when you were 12. So I mean, it does make sense there.
Yeah. Straight up. I love her. But anyway. Yeah, like how do we get off on the the Rockies, they who knows, they're sitting there at 500, right? Like we said, they got a chance to split this set maybe, but if they can finish it, with 33 wins, which I think is about where both you and I predicted they would, and where I think they're in a decent spot to do so, especially if they can take care of business against like the Giants and the Angels and these teams and be all right. They're going to be right there, but Patrick, it is interesting. I was talking with some of the people down here at the DNVR bar about just sort of the frustration of, like, the Rockies are the 5th best team in the National League, and sometimes it's 7th and sometimes it's 4th, and they've sort of swung back and forth, and that's where they've been, and that's what I've talked about over and over again in 17 and in 18 and even in 19 until they totally fell apart. That's about where they were, 4th or 5th best team in the National League. But it's the most frustrating 4th place, 5th place team of all time. It just, there are so many games out there, it feels like they leave on the table that they could have won. So I get where that frustration comes from. What is the key moving forward now for them to do that? For them to sit in here at 500 with less than half the season to play? How do they make sure that this doesn't become a disaster that they have to apologize for, but instead that they finish in 4th place, which is where they should be, but frustrating?
I think from what we've seen, particularly in that 2 for 12 atrocious slump that they had for those 2 weeks, I think from looking at that, because that's what you don't want, you need to do 2 things. One is you need to keep Nolan Arenado happy. So if batting 3rd is just a simple solution to keep him happy, then so be it. Charlie Blackmon will figure it out, batting cleanup. Yes, he's fallen off the table just a little bit, but, I mean, when the table is propped up at batting 500, I mean, no one's on that table.
It's quite the table to fall off of. Yeah.
Yes, so keeping him happy, and we've seen him, he's been a doubles machine this entire week. I think he's had 5 or 6, so he's really raised his average. He's just so much more comfortable. That's going to allow you to win that many more games, or at least keep you at 500. And the other thing is to figure out a solution for this bullpen. And Mychal Givens is a big solution for the bullpen. Smaller one is giving a guy like Ryan Rawlson an opportunity.
Yes.
And really making sure that you've got the right guy in the 5 spot. If it's Castellani, he needs to make sure he's eating up those innings, because you can't afford to have the bullpen be tired or fatigued. You need those bullets for those guys in those games that you can win. And
he's got to fight through that a little better.
That's right. And if it's not him, it's Chi-Chi.
That's right.
So they've got to answer that. Those are kind of the big pieces that are going to be the difference from a complete, tank into the garbage like we saw in 2019, or a surge into the playoffs. Even if it's just a comfortable, just, hey, we rode this wave in. We didn't really have to do too much work. I think even a 30-30 record can get them into the playoffs, right? You're not aiming for that.
Yeah.
You're not aiming for that.
No.
But if they go 30-30 and they get into the playoffs, okay, great. It's a whole new season.
Give me the Cubs in a first-round matchup. Give me the Cubs.
Wow, you really hope, right? You really hope.
Yeah, straight up. All right, I'm going to swing for the fence here with this last question I got to ask you. And speaking of swinging for the fences, though I don't think they have fences, I think you got to swing for the green in WGT Golf. You can find it for free over at DNVRGolf.com. It's so much fun. Totally free, loved by more than 20 million players around the world, though I think that number has gone up since we started playing it here at DNVR. We have had to have now 3 different country clubs. I think we're going to have to open up a 4th very soon. That's just how much fun people are having with this game. That's how popular it's been. We're all having a blast with it, whether you're playing full stroke or closest to the hole at world-famous golf courses, including Bethpage, Black, or Pebble Beach. Man, it's just so much fun, like I said, and you've got nothing to risk. There's literally no downside. It's free. So get it on your phone or your computer today at dnvrgolf.com. And so as I ask you, Patrick, this final question before we sign off here, you and I are sitting in the office. You're the GM, I'm the assistant GM, or you're the other way around. You're Brad Pitt and I'm Jonah Hill, right? Those were the names of the actual people, right? And we've got these Rockies decisions to make today. Oh, here we go. Michael's even asking the question I'm asking right now. What would you do in Breidich's position? We've got the question about James Pazos. It sounds like, is that the guy who goes down if you're bringing up Ryan Rollison? And are you trying to move out Murphy and these other guys? But I think that's really the big move. If we're sitting there and you're saying, I'm buying what you're selling now. If I'm Brad Pitt and you're Jonah Hill, and you're saying we got to bring up Ryan Rollison, I'm saying, okay, who am I sending you to say we got to option you out? And what other things are you trying to sell me on? Who are you trying to get me to call and say, hey, we got to move this guy, we got to move that guy, or we got to target? I know Cleveland isn't selling, but I love Simber, their reliever, who just throws that sidewinder. I love him all day. Like, who's your guy who you're coming in and saying, Billy, this is the guy we need?
Well, if I had my druthers, and I don't know that San Francisco is really going to play ball here, it's Tony Watson.
It is. It's got to be.
And I think, maybe, just maybe, there's a chance because Joey Bart, has struggled a little bit, and you certainly don't want to, tear him down this early in the game after 9 games, batting 167 going into today. But maybe you say, hey, look, we'll give you Elias Diaz. He's your guy that you can start, 3 out of every 5 games. You can relax on Joey Bart. Also, make sure that his service clock doesn't keep ticking away. And
right.
You have that opportunity to maybe start him in the minors in a normal season in 2021 so that you can gain back that extra year of control over his contract. Then Diaz, Watson, go ahead, throw in a bucket of balls or a low-level minor league player, cash considerations, whatever it is, get that lefty. That would be the most ideal situation. I think Murphy's going to be a little harder just because of the money he's making. It's not a lot, but it's something. Diaz is not making any money. I think that would be the most ideal trade that I would try to swing. And at worst case scenario,
sold.
I would literally call the other 29 teams and just go, do you have any lefties? That's it. Do you just have them? And you say, maybe you can make a deal.
Southpaw.
I mean, think about like the deal last year with Talkman for Deal, where you just were like, all right, look, we can't use this guy. Who's a guy that you're really not digging on that much? That's a double-A guy.
Totally.
And they kicked it. They gave Deal a shot, and he's had his moments, and he still's got a long career ahead of him. But
I think so.
Moment of 2019, you go, wow, you got something for nothing. So again, who do you got out there that's a lefty, a veteran? He's got a 13.5 ERA. He probably won't be that bad with us.
He's due.
We'll give it a shot. We just
right.
want some fresh blood, especially if you're not going to give Rollison that opportunity. Just
right.
give me somebody.
Do both.
Just to breathe some life into it. And yes, Pazos can go to the alternate site to try to figure out what's what.
That's
so you've got some opportunities. They're all relatively low risk. But I think you can make those trades and feel really good about, hey, the bullpen's got a little bit more life in it right now, and they've got a shot. They've got a shot to do some things come the postseason.
Totally. Well, before we're allowed to get out of here, Patrick, we do, despite the 13 to loss, well, pretty much a 13 to loss. Who cares how many runs the Rockies scored at that point? It was 2 of them. But we do have to give out a draft king of the game, and it was for our guy Chichi Gonzalez. We talked about it a little bit earlier, how he did come into this one sort of quietly, give 4 innings of a very, very solid performance there for Chichi. Only giving up the 2 hits. Yeah, one of them ended up going over the fence, but still a very, very solid outing. What you wanted to see, and really just his second appearance this year. He hasn't been able to pitch with the injury, so Solid stuff. Oh, looks like we've got a little bit of news coming in here right as we were about to close off, but still good stuff from Gigi Gonzalez becoming the Draft King of the game. Remember to use that promo code DNVR on that DraftKings Sportsbook. And I'm gonna try to get this name, and I'm gonna go with Darilis. Said that Nightingale has just announced, and it sounds like the Avalanche have just announced that they've scored a goal, and Nightingale has just announced that Mike Clevenger has been added to the San Diego Padres. And that's a very good pickup. Again, depending on what they had to give up, and I'd have to look at Mike Clevenger's contract status, but just as a pitcher, I know he is very, very good. And so that can absolutely impact things moving forward here in this division.
Yeah, this is a move that's not just for 2020. This is a move even beyond. He is not a free agent until after the 2023 season.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So
after
move. This year,
they've
got
up
him for 3 more years. And again, going back to it, the Padres were really bad, which allowed them to get, a lot of really good draft picks, and they were creative. We go back and listen to all of our draft coverage. The Padres were ahead of the Rockies in every single pick. Going number 8, they did not pick the best high school outfielder. They picked the second best. Rockies got the best. They got Zach Veen.
Right.
Padres go out, they get Robert Hassel III, save a little money there, and then they go and get a stud, essentially the ace pitcher, the Friday night starter for the Georgia Bulldogs, Cole Wilcox. They are able to get him with their 3rd pick, pay him a little bit extra money. So again, they get quantity really versus that we got to get just this one guy. They've spread it out so incredibly well. They've done a really good job on the international market. And the thing that they've done, and Drew, this is that conversation of how teams don't necessarily need to operate the same way. This is the one area in which the Rockies have absolutely failed, I think, throughout their history. Now, they've traded Holiday, and they traded Tulo, they've traded Ubaldo, they've traded 3 of their big guys. But other than that, they have not gone and made these small little deals here and there when they've needed to.
Right.
The Padres did it with Chase Headley. When his time was up, they got Yangervis Solarte, who then when his time was up, they went and they dealt him for Edward Olivares, and then they turned Edward Olivares to Kansas City for Trevor Rosenthal, all for a guy in Chase Headley whose time was done with the Padres 6 years ago. And now they've got Trevor Rosenthal for when they're good. The Rockies haven't done that, and the Padres have. That's one of the reasons why their system has been so incredibly, incredibly stacked. And, man, they are here to stay, period.
We will see. It looks like there's some pushback on whether or not this is final. Robert Murray, as I'm looking at Twitter right now, is saying the Padres do not have a deal for Mike Clevenger at this time. That was tweeted 5 minutes after Bob Nightingale's tweet about the Padres being the leaders to get him. So it looks like maybe final details are being worked out here, but that's a deal you don't want going through if you're a Rockies fan, almost regardless of what the Padres have to give up. You don't want Clevenger. Like, Mike Clevenger's a very good pitcher. He's just a very good pitcher. And that was the one part of the Padres team that I predicted that's been right so far, because mostly I've been wrong about the Padres. Look at them go. But the pitching has been mediocre. They've been winning games primarily on an extraordinarily hot offense, which I think at least was going to cool off before maybe now the additions of Castro and Moreland. Like, you look at the bottom of that lineup, they don't scare you. They still don't. But Austin Hedges being replaced by Jason Castro, maybe. Still, though, you got to hope that one doesn't go through, man. You don't want Mike Clevenger in this division. You got to hope this falls through and hope that this is a Bob Nightingale misfire. Because, and I saw this, Will, that the D-backs are shopping Starling Marte and Archie Bradley. And you're saying you would? So would I. In a heartbeat, I would bring Starling Marte to Coors Field. I don't think it'll happen, but in a heartbeat.
And he's on a favorable contract. It is an option for next year, I think, at $2.5 million. So
give me that.
He's real cheap.
Give me that.
Yeah, that would be a bargain. I'd
move Rogers for Starling Marte. I'm not even joking. I would move Brent, and it's stupid. Like, that's a stupid thing to do, and that's why I shouldn't be a GM. But Starling Marte will hit 375 at Coors Field for the next 2 years and play extraordinary defense. And I would love to see Starling Marte in a Rockies uniform, but seems unlikely. But 100%, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan Spader is the guy that originally reported Clevenger as that guy, and soon after he did, he said on Twitter, he said, quote, "What a disaster this will be for me should this fall through. I will get reamed by Twitter for weeks." Yeah, you can't just go out there and make statements like that. But the Padres, even after losing these guys in their top 30 list, they've got so much depth. You know, their number 3 prospect, C.J. Abrams, who was a first-rounder 2 years ago. They got Fernando Tatis at shortstop. What do you need another shortstop for? Sure, he can move over to third base, but again, they've got depth there. Last year, they acquired Taylor Trammell from Cincinnati, so they basically, when they gave up Franmil Reyes and other pieces, I think Adam Simber, in fact, was a part of that deal as well. They just said, okay, well, let's get a really good outfield prospect, and so they did. So they've just got studs, you know, all around that other teams are really coveting. And if you can swing a deal for a guy like Mike Clevenger, whose stock is down, right? Because if Cleveland wants to get rid of him, really to send a message like, look, you did something real bad. You lied to us. You didn't tell the truth. We're in a pandemic. We got guys here that are, you know, immunodeficient and compromised health, and you don't really seem to care about that. We don't want you around. So you know what? Even if we get 50 cents on the dollar, we got to make that trade. And the Padres are like, we'll take them.
Sounds like the asking price is high, according to John Heyman. So right now our sources are Bob Nightingale and John Heyman. So longtime listeners to the podcast, take that with however you will.
My sources are Bob Norton and Paul Heyman. Bob Orton and Paul Heyman.
Love it.
So those are the guys that I've gotten my baseball information from these days.
So
Payback.
we're talking about, again, here down at the DNVR bar today, about being a Colorado Rockies fan and what it means. And if you all are not familiar with the story of professional wrestler Tommy Dreamer, I think that's what being a Colorado Rockies fan is. Look, you can be a fan. You want to be a fan of the Dodgers or the Yankees. You want to be a fan of Bill Goldberg or Ric Flair or John Cena. Rock and roll. No power to you. Take all those championships. Be the best of the best. Hardly ever lose. You're dominant. When you win, you're supposed to win. And then when you lose, it's really disappointing because you were supposed to win. But Tommy Dreamer went 6 years in ECW and never won a match and just got his face beaten in and got bloodied and beat up. And then one day, one time, against a guy who'd beaten him 25 times in a row, Tommy Dreamer won a match. And the place went crazy. And that is what it's like to be a Colorado Rockies fan, man. You're not the overdog, whatever that, I don't think that's a phrase. You are always the underdog. You are always fighting from behind. You've always got less weaponry and less backup and less resources and fewer reinforcements than the other guys.
And the other guys are using kendo sticks, and they're going to light your back up.
You're going to get bloody.
The entire arena, or in this case, all of the U.S., They want to see Tommy Dreamer. They want to see the Colorado Rockies be successful. They'll jump on our backs. They'll jump on the bandwagon in the end. But right now they're just like, yeah, he's all right. They're all right.
When that moment comes, though, and you think this might happen because it will have been so improbable, it will be one of the greatest moments in the history of sports.
I love this analogy. And I guess maybe that makes the Los Angeles Dodgers Shane Douglas and
Sandman or Raven or
and yeah, I don't know who Raven is yet.
I think Raven was Padres are starting to turn into Raven a little bit.
Whoever the second best team in the that the pundits think is in the NL West, that's Raven for that year.
Yeah, it's the Padres right now, despite the fact that the Rockies actually have gotten the better of them. And something, again, that's another thing you and I talked about. It's kind of funny that, even in this stretch, again, if they get the split, they'll be fine against these Padres here. But, boy, it's rough when they drop one 13-2. But as I haven't done this one in a while. Mary's not with us today. Mary always loved it when I would go to the Lord of the Rings analogy and quote Gimli and remind everybody that only counts as one. They will play again tomorrow. They will send their ace, unless their ace is Antonio Senzatella. Yeah, I said it. They will send Herman Marquez to the hill, who really should be their ace, as Patrick said earlier, out for vengeance, out to prove that he is who we thought he was, who he is, who he expects himself to be. It's a big game. The Rockies, we've said this much times, they need a win. They really need to get this one, and I suspect they're going to come out and play a very good game on Monday night. We'll be there with you covering it as always. So you got to make sure you're following us on the social media at Patrick D. Lyons, at Drew Creasman, at DNVR_Rockies. You got to subscribe to the DNVR.com so you don't miss out on any of that written content. Plus, you get discounts on all of our merchandise, including this cool shirt and hat. Nope, I did that backwards. Shirt and hat that I am currently wearing. We also got masks, all kinds of cool stuff, and you can come down here at the DNVR bar and find any of that. Otherwise, we can only ask that whatever the final score of the game may be, you continue to remain absolutely awesome out there. We will continue to remain absolutely Patrick Lyons and Drew Creasman in here. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.